So we're back. We're on the Lane podcast. Today's July the 5th. And in an effort, I think maybe to, we've gotten so many views lately. I think at least 10 to 20. In an effort to maybe have less, we're going to talk about a topic that might be a little out there.
Suppress it?
Surprising. Maybe, suppress the excitement around here. So today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, or known as AI. But before we get started, I like to banter a little bit before we get started. I want to ask you a question, technology related, not about AI. So where were you December 31st, 1999? Do you remember where you were?
Yes, I was at our house. We were celebrating the new millennium.
Yes. Were you scared?
No.
Did you have water? Did you have cans of food? Were you packing? Were you ready for...
Well, it depends on how much, but yes, we had the ability to... We had a little bit of water, but we had filters. We do backpacking, so we had ways to filter water.
What were you feeling? Were you feeling like the computers were going to shut down?
No.
Well, you were confident.
I was pretty confident they weren't going to shut down then. Now, if you go back 6 months, a year earlier, we were doing a lot of remediation at a bank for systems that had date calculations, and so we were setting those ahead, running them, making sure that there wouldn't be a problem. We replaced a number of systems. We did a lot of things to get ready. So
you felt confident that everything would be fine.
Well, I felt confident. Well, I certainly didn't believe that people's credit cards would be wiped clean and you could run them up ahead of time. I knew that wasn't going to be the case. Did I think everything was going to go smoothly, that there would be no interruption? No, I thought there would be some interruptions. But most of the activities related to communication, banking, those things had been worked on for a lot of years, and a lot of money was spent trying to make sure there wasn't a problem with the 2-digit and 4-digit year. So I was much more concerned a year ahead of time than I was when we got to that point.
Gotcha. So you were just celebrating New
Yeah.
Year's Eve. Do you know where I was?
Were you born?
I was alive. I was in high school.
Okay.
I was at a party, and someone very clever, when it went to midnight, didn't just turn the lights off. They went down to the box, the electrical box, the circuit breaker, and turned all the power off.
I like that.
To the entire house. Everyone freaked out, and they left it off for a good 5 to 10 seconds. Then they turned it back on. It was awesome.
Yeah. Is this a theme for, should we be scared of artificial intelligence or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there are some connections. Maybe I think maybe just how people think about technology and like what is going to happen. So I don't know. I thought about it, and I thought
it is a good connection.
Where you were.
What's your view on when there's significant change or potential discussions about great opportunity or significant threats? So I think that's a good one. Yeah.
So today we're talking about AI. If you're listening to this and you're in computer science, or you are in technology, or a lot about AI, we're sorry, because we might bumble some things here. We're not experts in this. Craig has more experience than I do, just in his business role. I use it slightly, a little bit with teaching, but not as much as Craig does. So we are going to just explain generalities with artificial intelligence. We do think some people at Carriage Lane will find value in this, but we're not saying we're experts. We're just kind of going at this from our experience and what we understand right now. Would you agree with that, Craig?
I think that's good. I think the other thing that's useful is, why are we covering a topic like this? So items that hit culture, we want to talk to them, talk around them, and think through how that influences our lives, how we might think about these things in a faithful way, in a way that stewards our time, our energy, our strength.
Good. So let's start with, do you want to start with maybe some vocab words?
Yeah, sure. So artificial intelligence is the category that is most commonly used to house several other terms that are more specific. That taxonomy or that grouping can be different, but we usually think of machine learning, generative AI, and agentic AI as the three primary elements in this broader category of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence being having machines think like humans to some extent. Machine learning is heavily about detecting patterns, the normal, cause and action of behavior, and detecting anomalies, like what is not right. Generative AI is creating things. So this can be creating new text, it can be creating images, it can be creating sequences of numbers, whether it's a forecast. Agentic AI comes from agent, and it's a bunch of scripts or agents that will perform various tasks and can coordinate and sync between different agents. So that's doing. So agentic is doing, generative is creating, and machine learning is detecting and learning from large language models, learning from all kinds of data, whatever form it comes in.
Yeah, my research yesterday, some of the stuff I kind of looked at, generative AI waits for a human to give it a prompt, and agentic AI can take a prompt and then continue a process. Is that correct? Like one is more, you give it a prompt and it gives you an answer, and the other is you give it a prompt, but it'll keep reiterating that answer until you get what you want.
Maybe some examples might make sense. So
Yeah.
Generative AI, you may say, instead of doing a search for a particular topic, whatever you list, and it leads you to websites that have information written about them, you could say, give me a summary of such and such, and you can give it specific instructions to create or to generate a summary. And maybe it came out and it was a TLDR, too long, didn't read. It's like, okay, he gave you 500 words. You're like, okay, same thing, tighten that down to 100 words. And so then it summarizes it further. And so each of those, it's generating information based upon what it has, and it's pulling that information up for you. And so that's based on the prompts that you have. Now, agentic AI or agents can trigger generative AI activities that can follow a process and do that repeatedly across a number of domains.
So your background, would you say your background, finance, treasury, that's your background? How would you explain that to people who don't know what your background is? Like what your job, what you do for a living?
Yeah, so it's we're consultants and researchers in finance, particularly focused on the treasury part of the finance world.
I guess, how have you seen generative and agentic AI in your sphere of expertise?
Yeah, and machine learning. So machine learning, detects patterns. Where do we see that? And maybe even more broadly than finance, machine learning is used for things like data loss prevention, DLP, where certain activities are happening that are not the norm. Maybe emails are sending out quite a bit of information, way more than should be, or certain fields or files are being accessed at a rate that's not been seen before. And so it may detect that and say maybe data is being lost. If we move into treasury, it might be, here's some things that are anomalous related to payments. Payment instructions have been changed. Now someone's trying to make a payment. We haven't seen this before. It's happening at a certain time. And so you use that to help fight against fraud.
Right.
So it can detect anomalous behaviors.
Yeah, that's what I was reading about yesterday. Machine learning is really good with detecting fraud, like detecting a lot of data. And then if this is an outlier, it kind of investigates why is that an outlier.
It's also being used, currently being used primarily within systems that treasury people use, forecasting cash flows. So it can take history of cash flows, which we may have pulled into Excel and did same as last year, plus 3%, determine periodicity, day of week, week of month, and then you factor in some large transactions that you know about to change those models. Instead of doing those in Excel, maybe using other data to forecast more accurately, maybe even forecasting receivables by individual company. And there's systems that are sold that track receivables and see payment patterns based on companies. So as opposed to taking a bucket of items, it can generate a forecast by individual area and then consolidate that.
So let's go on to, can you explain to someone how this learning roughly works? Like what is actually happening? Can you, in layman's terms?
We're a research firm. My day job, my regular job is research and consulting. And so we do research AI. We did a second survey on it after a year just to see people's attitudes and perspectives. So how does it work? I mean, how does it think like a human? Well, it has to be trained. It has to have information. And so if you're familiar with ChatGPT or Bard or there's some of the other ones, maybe you're using it within your Microsoft tools, you're using Copilot. Where are they trained on? What do they learn? And so the term large language model comes into play. And that means you have to train it on a lot of data. And what's a lot of data? You run it through, the internet, for example, to run and scour the internet to see what people are saying, capturing that information, and then allowing it to learn or to train on that. On an individual basis, it might be a smaller language model or smaller data set that you're training on. It might be your receivable information. So you're training on that so it can detect the patterns within that particular domain or sphere. So you're training it. You can train it on any category you want. Most people are familiar, playing with like a Chat GPT and that model, which learns. And then there's this whole feedback mechanism. How do you make it smarter? When you ask a question, certain questions will come back, it's wrong. And then you correct it. And then the model should get smarter. What's the capital, of Australia? And it may come back with Sydney in the early days. And people are like, that's wrong.
Right.
Well, now it'll tell you it's Canberra. But there's a way of training it to making it better. Same thing like with writing. Like you can say, write a report, and you can do a simple outline or you can do a more complex outline.
Right.
You can also load up your own papers. Let's say you've written a lot of papers.
Yeah.
You can say, write it after this style. So my style.
Right.
You can, of course, do funny things like
Right.
ask, what would Abraham Lincoln say about artificial intelligence?
Right.
And it will no longer make it up and say he said this, which some of the hallucinations early on would do.
Right.
But I did run that the other day. I was trying to fake it out. It's harder to fake it out on some of these things.
Really?
So, yeah. I asked, I think this one was, I can't remember which one I used. It might have been ChatGPT or
Gemini
or Copilot, I think maybe. And so I asked him, what did Abraham Lincoln think about AI? It says he wasn't around when AI existed. Then I said, what would he have said if he were around? And so it says, imagine quotes. And then it says, in the spirit of Lincoln's wisdom. So it's getting smarter to say, you're not faking me out on this.
Yeah.
Here's one. If in the broad field of invention we fashion a machine that thinks, let us hope it serves to uplift the many and not merely the few. And as we endow our creations with great power, we must remember it is not the machine, but the mind that makes it wise or perilous. And there's other ones. So it's just kind of, it's combining different styles and pulling them together. So and it can do that very quickly.
Yeah. I've used that sometimes in school. The certain group of kids I work with don't generally use AI, even though it's available. But I'll even show them like how easy it is. Like you can write this essay in the voice of a 7th grader. Like you can make it to where they still don't care. But let's talk more about, you mentioned hallucinations. What are you talking about? That sounds like a very human thing to say, Craig.
Yeah, so how I've taken to explaining hallucinations, because what can happen is if you ask something of AI and it gives you a very dumb answer, what can be your reaction? Be like, this is useless. It's only a game. There's nothing that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that you start to take out hallucinations and you learn how to use it, it can become a better and better tool.
Yeah.
To the extent that you ignore it, it's like to say, I don't use mobile phones because they came in a big bag and they were terrible. Well, they've changed a lot, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
And so there's a way to look at it. So we look at hallucinations as if you're asking an AI system to generate something, you're asking it to perform a function. And so how is it doing that? And if you remember in math, interpolation was you're trying to find a number that we used to have tables, and you try to find a number between these two. And so it's like, okay, that's roughly 6/10. Here's how we come up with this number. So we're interpolating. Or if we look things farther outside our data set, right? It's not between two numbers. It's farther on. We may extrapolate. And so AI uses, for want of a better term, these interpolations, extrapolations. It's using vectors, if you will, to see how it would answer that question. And so then I'll try to pull some of these data points together. And so that's why it can hallucinate, because it's trying to create something and it can make errors. And some errors that a human may say, that's crazy.
Right.
It may not know until you continue to guide it within that range.
Right.
So there was a fairly famous case of a presidential personal lawyer who was convicted, and then he was trying to get some leniency. And so he's looking up case law that would help him.
Yeah.
And he presented a bunch of case law. And they're like, these aren't actual cases.
Yeah.
And like, where'd you get these from? It's like, well, I used AI. And they're like, well, it made these up. And so it's not like it just makes them up.
Yeah.
Like to say, I'm going to make it up fictitiously.
Yeah.
But you're asking it questions, and it's looking up items, and it provided quotes.
Yeah.
And it provided references, like, jurisdiction and all that. And it put it in the right format because it was trying to create, just like you say, create a story.
Yeah.
And so it makes up a story. And so it can extrapolate on these. Now, if you're looking at case law, you need to have it find exact cases. So that's where it can be surprising. It can be surprisingly good and surprisingly bad.
Yeah.
But, what have you trained it on? And then how broad are the parameters makes a
Have
difference.
you ever heard of the word grounding in this sense? Because one of the things I was reading yesterday was talking about hallucinations. And then basically the guy said, depending on how well you grounded, that's basically depending on how well the work it will produce. This is kind of like, well, how good your input is basically how good your output will be.
How well you trained it, right? There's different levels of this training. And if you've ever watched any of those videos with robots and how they do the training, like they might have the guy's got a button to push it, right? It's for like in a factory. And he pulls this welder thing over. He puts it in the first spot, hits a button 1. And then he physically pulls it over to 2, hits 2, 3, and 4, and he saves it. And he pushes the thing back to the start position, where he starts it and ends it. And then he hits run, and it comes out and moves to position 1, welds 3, 4, and then goes back. And so in less than a minute, he had trained it to perform a particular function that had those spots. Now, that would be very rudimentary and basic. Well, there'd be other things to say. You could build in welding needs to occur every so many inches. Here are the points of contact. And so you build on all these different models, and it'll know where to weld. So you could move to the next level. But it was very quick for him to just move it, press a button, and then move it back. And so now it was trained very easily to the same point. What data are you going to train it on? Are you going to train it on the unfettered internet? Are you going to have quality of sites? Are you going to provide information that you use? I mean, this is really important. You've heard garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
If you train it on garbage, you are going to get extrapolated garbage.
So here's a question on here. How should we think about our relationship with AI, considering its capabilities and limitations, compared to our relationship with other important technologies in history? Kind of like what we're talking about Y2K. This touches on that a little bit.
Well, I'll give you an example, because ahead of time we did plan what we're going to talk about. So the analogy I'm going to use is one from when I was a kid.
Okay.
And I've reaped a lot of benefits from using that analogy. And then I also want to give an example using chess and some models for that. So when I was a teenage boy, had access to a giant bulldozer.
Okay.
And some of my friends and I had access to that. I won't go into all the details on that. We shouldn't have had access to it. I'll just say that. We started using the bulldozer, and it was huge. It was a huge bulldozer. The bucket was massive. And we first started using it. We got it started, and we saw, there's 3 pedals, and there's, I can't remember how many. The right side had, I think, two levers and some other mechanism for controlling the bucket. And there's, 3 brakes, and, there was forward and backwards on the tracks. And so when we started using it, we were terribly inefficient.
Yeah.
Like, instead of you picture in your mind just scooping and moving stuff. Well, you don't know how to use it at all. And you're
jerking, and
it's like you're typing with your elbows.
Yeah.
And so you're pushing the dirt, and then you stop the thing because you dug it down too deep. And finally you get some dirt. And then we raised it. I remember raising it up over our heads. I was like, okay, we got over a ton of dirt over our heads. That's not good. And so we lowered it down. So I think they had safety devices in it. So
knowing that there'd be teens.
But within 45 minutes or an hour, we got so we could move dirt halfway there. So we moved a ton of dirt. We moved stuff, we scooped stuff, we could move it around. And it was like we were learning very quickly.
Yeah.
Within that 30 or 40 minutes, whatever that time frame was, we moved more dirt than our whole neighborhood could have moved with shovels in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right? So it was extremely powerful, but in the beginning we couldn't use it very well. And then there's also some danger. So I was glad that there were some guardrails that were able to talk today, and I didn't get killed by dumping dirt on myself. But I mean, that's an interesting analogy because it's supremely powerful, but it has to be directed and understood. And so there's some facility and use that you have to have in that. So there's a training. So I was one of the people that had to be trained.
Was there a friend in this group that was like, "Hey guys, let's don't do this"?
No.
Really? You didn't have that one friend?
No.
Just kind of like, guys, I don't know.
No.
Then you have the other guys, let's go for it. No.
No. Okay. There was nobody who said that.
Oh.
Somebody had found it and got other people involved in it because we had a lot of work to do.
Did you ever think about the contractor, whoever left it there on purpose, knowing you guys would get some work done for him? Did you ever think about that?
I don't think we got all the work done that he wanted to. We did move some stuff around. We did more. We did more with
Damage.
the. We did more with the giant wood chipper, which could have pulled a person in. We got a lot of his work done.
Wait,
from that.
all of this stuff was just
keys
different
were,
times. These were different times.
No,
people
no,
left
no.
work, just equipment running.
Keys. No, it wasn't running.
Kids were just.
The key was left under the seat.
Okay.
In the bulldozer, the wood chipper. I think the key was left in the thing, but the giant crane, there was no key that could be found. So, I mean, I just say that's a background for learning. It's not.
Yeah.
Let's not get distracted by things they shouldn't have done. But the issue of it could be very dangerous.
Yeah.
Like we could have caused tremendous damage,
Yes.
etc. But that whole learning, like we were doing learning and self-training. There wasn't someone saying, "Here's the best way to scoop or to turn, go forward or reverse one, reverse." One track goes forward, one track goes back. So we were just learning by trying with the 3 brakes. Center one controlled both of them. The right one controlled the right tread. So we were just learning on that way. In 1997, Deep Blue played Garry Kasparov in chess. Okay. And that was a grandmaster who was helping to feed the system. And it ended up beating Garry Kasparov that year. I think the year prior, Garry Kasparov won. And so he said he was scared because the thing was adapting during the game. This was in 97. So he accused the grandmasters of making updates between games or maybe even during games. That was very, very interesting. But that was the point where machines could play a game just by the brute force of running so many combinations made sense. In 2017, so 20 years later, AlphaZero surpassed Stockfish in terms of its ability to run games. Stockfish was a computer game.
Okay.
And they loaded up massive amounts of, I think, all the Grandmaster games they could into the system.
Chess.
So it had
still chess.
Still chess.
Yeah.
Had all this information in there about the games. It had a playing style, et cetera. So it was like the state of the art.
Yeah.
AlphaZero was created, and it ran and trained itself. So it was inputting into the system were the rules.
Yeah. For
playing chess, and then it played itself. It didn't play other computers. It didn't load other games in.
Yeah.
It played itself, I think, for 9 hours. And I don't know how many games it played at a time, but I think it played like 4 million games.
Wow.
And so each game, it's learning how to do chess better.
Yeah.
The estimate was that in 4 or 5 hours, it was better than Stockfish.
Wow.
But it played Stockfish, and they played 100 games, and it had 28 wins, 0 losses, and 72 draws. So no losses in those 100. Later on, they played 1,000 games. I think there were some more adjustments. Then it was 155 wins to 6 losses to 839 draws. So it still dominated substantially. And so that's not necessarily just using pure strategy. It's using this training and playing against itself. And so in 9 hours, it beat the leaders of the day in that. That's a little bit on the training side. I think you were asking the question about how do we think about it with other technologies
in history?
What has changed? What has transformed how we do work? And there's always this, let's go back to, how do we move around? Well, we use a buggy. We walk. We use a buggy. We use a car. We use trains. We use jets. So there's significant changes with what we do. And there's dangers, right? If we're traveling in a car, what were the people concerned about, right? You're traveling at such a great rate of speed. You're going to overfly your angels. You die in a crash, right? There's all these concerns. So you build in safety features. You find ways to manage it. So it's certainly a lot faster getting around in a car than by horse in most situations.
So we meet at 10:30 on Sundays. Is that right? Every Sunday?
It is. Sunday school's earlier, but
9:15 Sunday school, 10:30. And the first Sunday of every month, we have dinner, potluck. Bring something. You can bring a bag of chips, or you can bring smoked meats. It's the gamut runs the whole range. I think we
have a service on the first and third Sunday too, right?
We do.
Yeah.
We don't just eat dinner together. We actually worship together and have communion. So we're at Carriage Lane. Is it 104 Carriage Lane? What's the address?
It's 101.
101 Carriage Lane, Peachtree City, Georgia. If you're in the area, come see us.
Our website is currently carriagelanepress.com. Yeah, so it's carriagelanepress, PRES.com. We will soon have carriagelane.church, and we also have carriagelane.com. generative.com. And so those are not pointing anywhere yet, but those will come up soon.
All right, Craig, I'll see you on the lane.
See you.